Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Saturday night edition of the LFC Transfer Room. I'm Richie, and I'll be one of your hosts tonight. We are waiting for Matty to join us. Thankfully, though, I'm joined alongside Kev. How you doing, Kev?
All good, mate. All good. It's the weekend. Happy days. All good, mate. Sun is shining. Makes a difference for the weekend. All good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to the Leicester game actually tomorrow. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in that game. 10 o'clock kickoff UK time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And also, Neil, how are you, Neil? You okay? I'm loving your backdrop, by the way. So much memorabilia there. It's lovely to see.
Yeah, a lot of it is actually covering up a lot of mess in this room, so it's been strategically placed for that reason. But yeah, I've tried to make an effort, nick some of my son's stuff as well to get in here. But thank you for noticing.
Yeah, that's all right. I noticed because like here, loads of folders, loads of work stuff, just covering stuff. So I feel
Exactly.
Definitely 100%. And we'd like to say a big hello to everybody as well who is joining us in the stream. Already up to nearly 50, so please do make sure that you give us a like and a subscribe. It does go a long way. Okay, so we're going to crack on with transfer news, and we will get to the headline of the Khephren Thuram situation, etc. But the first one that we're going to look at is from Record Portugal, who was really instrumental actually in the Darwin Núñez deal. They were the first to break the Darwin Núñez deal last summer, and they're actually saying that Sporting Lisbon are trying to sign the Fluminese midfielder Andre, but unfortunately, Liverpool are also trying to sign him. The Reds do have more financial power, and the Brazilian side are asking for 20 million euros, which is around about 17 million pounds, in order to let him go. Now, this, I will be honest, is a player that I'm not overly familiar with. I'm not too sure whether you guys know much about him. I've only done the basic research really before we came onto the show today. Kev, what are your thoughts on Andrare, and also anybody in the comments as well? If you can give us a little bit of a heads up about the Fluminese midfielder.
It's nice that we're getting attracted to South American footballers for the change rather than someone in Europe for me. It's nice that we are linked with him. With that area. I've done the basics myself. He's 5'8", is he, or 5'7", or something like that. Bit on the small side, but tenacious. He's played 13 games for Fluminese this season, predominantly in the defensive midfielder role, which is where we're looking at. If I'm being truthfully honest, there's one at Boca Juniors that I would be more interested in signing, and that would have been Alan Varela, who's predominantly a little bit bigger than him and has got his blocks. And the downside to Andre for me is his aerials. He's not going to win many aerials in that middle of that park, being that small. But you know, it's somewhere we do need to add in. Is he the one for me? I don't know. I don't know enough about him, to be honest. But it's nice that we're linked with the South American for once for me.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we've got a South American footballing expert in Kev with us as well, because you bailed me out there a little bit by my lack of knowledge of him. So thank you for that. A massive thank you to Jen, who's donated £10 super sticker. Thank you so much, Jen. You do keep this channel afloat single-handedly at times, I think. So thank you so much for that. Also, I pulled up a comment earlier, which Vanessa said about Andre replacing Fabinho's position in the Brazilian national team. Neil, surely that bodes well for any sort of future that this young player has.
Yeah, I think again, I can't say that I've seen much of him. From what I've read over the past couple of weeks, he seems to be a very talented player. I think, as Kev says, he's not the biggest, so, and I don't think he's an out and out number 6 from what I've seen. So the way it's been described to me is he would be more of a Thiago replacement than a direct placement for Fabinho. I agree with Kev. It's nice to be linked with directly with a South American player playing over there. It doesn't feel like a very Liverpool thing to do at the moment, to go and buy someone from South America without seeing how they do in Europe. So I moved to the Portuguese league or even to someone like Wolves, because I think George Mendes is involved, may be more likely. The other thing that I did read and was reported on is they don't want to lose him until the end of the Brazilian Serie A season, and I think that's this winter. So I think they're not keen to lose the player until the January transfer window. But that's not to say he won't move now. It was just something that was reported. So yeah, so as explained to me, he's more of a Thiago replacement than a Fabinho replacement. But yeah, he's broken into the Brazil squad, and he's obviously got a lot of talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that he's not tall, Paul says, but he is 2 inches taller than N'Golo Kante, and we know how successful he was. I think, you know, with players like this, it is really nice, like we've all said, for actually Liverpool to be dipping their toes into the South American market. We've seen that Man City do well in that market, and as do the likes of Barcelona and especially Real Madrid as well. So I think Liverpool do need to perhaps go further than Europe. And if this lad is all that everyone says he's cracked up to be, hopefully we'll get there. I'm just going to change tact very quickly. Jen has asked, as quite a few others have, what is happening with Lavia. He actually came on as a sub today for the last 15 minutes. Now, hopefully, you know, as Glenn said, why did Southampton play it today? Hopefully that's a little bit of a farewell, and hopefully that was our last game. But maybe it's also Southampton playing a little bit of a game saying, look, if you're not going to pay up, we all know what they want. This is what's going to happen. I do believe that the second Liverpool bid, which was around about 42.5 million plus an extra 2.5 million in add-ons, is pending on Southampton's table. So maybe they're mulling it over. Maybe they're thinking about it. So as a few of us have said, you know, his move doesn't look imminent. However, you know, there's certainly personal terms agreed if you're going off other people. There are 121 people in this chat listening to us talk all things Liverpool Football Club. So do please give us a like and a subscribe. Thank you all very much for giving us your Saturday afternoon. Kev, talking about Lavia then, since we've been on it, do you think 45 million gets the deal done, or do you think Liverpool and FSG in particular are being a little bit tight? Do you think that perhaps that they need to dip their toes a little bit further into their you know, transfer budget?
I tend to think that is the case. It's as though, let's see how much less than the 50 million that Southampton wants, and going up in little amounts. 42 million plus add-ons. I think it's coming down more to how much is getting paid up front, more than anything else for me. I think that needs to be agreed with Southampton. They will be wanting a chunk of that, possibly 20%, 20 mil, probably a little bit more upfront. We're reluctant to do that. It'll eventually get done. I want it done as soon as possible, but I'm not fuming with Southampton for putting him on the bench and playing him, because nothing's been agreed. He's still a Southampton player, so you know, he was on the bench. He came on for 15 minutes. It's not what you want to see, but it's kind of then putting an influence on Liverpool then to try and sort things out. I think it will get sorted out in the next 48 hours, I think, because I think predominantly, we were trying to get the money from Fabinho first and getting that sorted before we moved on in bringing people in. It'll eventually get done. It doesn't help with the fact that Chelsea are getting linked with them and want to come in and force the hand a bit. I don't think that will work. I think it's a ploy from Chelsea to say to Brighton, look, we'll look elsewhere if you're not going to do anything with Caicedo with us. I'm happy with Lavia comes in. I would like him predominantly on that plane as ASAP to Singapore. So I think in the next 24 hours we may hear more about it, but I do think it's a bit of a tact at the minute between Liverpool and Southampton, and I think it's more down to how much they want up front than anything else for me.
Yeah, it seems to be the structure of the deal, doesn't it? And the add-ons, are they going to be realistic or not? Maybe that's what's slowing things down. On the topic of Chelsea, it seems they have reached a verbal agreement with Leslie Ugochukwu, and the deal is in place. Personal terms agreed, long-term contract, and he will sign for Chelsea around about 27 million euros. That's a really big signing, I think, for Chelsea, and that might just annoy Southampton, because it did look as though Chelsea were going to enter the race. So maybe Southampton now have their hands tied a little bit more. Neil, thoughts on the Lavia deal? How it's progressing?
Yeah, I think the Chelsea thing probably was the thing that's means that we haven't completed the deal as of yet. I think it'll probably be done over the next couple of days. Today, Chelsea, as you say, they've signed the lad from Rennes, who is a central midfield player, and there's also news that they're going to go back with another bid for Casado. So that did seem to me to suggest that Lavia may be set on us, and I do expect it to go through quite quickly over the next day or two. Well, I hope it will anyway. I do want him. We do need to get him in as soon as possible. Everyone's saying we need to get him in, and he needs to have played before the Chelsea match. I'm not sure he'll start against Chelsea. I'm not sure it's something that we will do. You know, he's a 19-year-old with huge potential. He may play, but I know, you know, with players in the past, we've not always thrown them straight in. Fabinho himself, almost half a season before he got introduced to the team. I'm not saying it will be the same with Lavia, but I don't think this drive to get it over the line for him to then start against Chelsea is necessarily how things will pan out. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a massive. I don't know. It's going to be big. I think Lavia is Premier League ready, as he showed last season, but it feels like Vanessa has said here, we need a strong destroyer as a defensive midfielder. Lavia is not enough. What happens if he does get injured next season? We do have the likes of Bajcetic who can play there. I've always said that I think he's better, more advanced, even though he started as a centre-back. I think that's his better position. Until he feels out of it, until he finds his strength. I've always said as well that I do genuinely believe that central defensive midfielder as that six is the hardest position to play on that pitch. It's not something that Trent could step into and play on his own, or Curtis Jones necessarily could play on his own. You know, so it's a massive specialist position for me. So hopefully, you know, we get the Lavia deal over the line, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get one more in. Let's go on to our Japanese winger then. So reports from today were that Liverpool had a €7 million bid rejected from the LASK winger Nakamura. He is a left winger, and it's from a source which is quite well connected, really, to Nakamura, etc. So, Kev, is €7 million? Bearing in mind that was rejected, so they want, I would say, slightly more than that, maybe €11 million gets it done. Can Liverpool afford to do that if apparently we're scrimping to buy a central midfielder, at least one, plus a centre-back, plus maybe another central midfielder if they come on the market?
It's a typical Liverpool thing we've seen over the years. We are prioritising, and we have an issue in certain areas, and then what we do is we go out and buy a player in a position where we're overly disposal of players. Do we need another left winger? I would kind of disagree with that. I think we've got too many on there anyway, and I think the money could be better utilised in other areas. Again, it's a player I haven't seen, but if you're bringing him in, is he going to be loaned straight back to the club he's coming from? And he doesn't come in this season; he comes in from the following season. Is it one for the future? I don't know. Is it another PR stunt? Is there going to be another flip that we'll do with, like we did with Minamino? Comes in for 1 or 2 seasons, see if he can do a job. Can't be done. We then flip him for a price. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with doing that, but I'd sooner see the money being better spent elsewhere for me. We've got an issue at centre-back. If we lose the likes of Kanate and Van Dijk at the same time, I would sooner be utilising the money there than on another area where we don't really need someone.
Yeah, Neil, we've been saying, actually, you know, that Liverpool should be building for the future. It just always seems that there's a priority before building for the future, whether it's a centre-back, a centre-forward, or a central midfielder like we're finding ourselves in this year. And they don't have that free cash to then build for a future and maybe bring someone in like this player who does look like a really, really good player, but our money needs to be spent elsewhere. So where does this Nakamura deal leave you, Neil?
I'm a bit mixed, because I think what I've read and what I've seen of this guy, he looks a really, really talented player. I think there's plenty of output in terms of goals and assists. Can you hear me? Sorry, can you hear me, or is it?
Yeah. I can hear something else though, but yeah.
Do you want to just go on to Kev? I'll mute it and get that sorted.
Yeah. I tell you what we'll do is Kev and I, while you're sorting out whatever it is that you're sorting out, I do want to go to this comment from Paul. Always great in the chat. This Japanese lad would only make sense if he was left-footed and could be Salah's understudy, and that's right, really. You know, it's not perhaps the left-footed side, but certainly that he could play on the right wing and utilise his right boot for that, because we do lack a Salah replacement. We are stacked, absolutely stacked in that left wing position, I think, for a few good years to come. So if he can do a Mane and if he can switch over, then, you know, that would be fabulous for Liverpool, because Salah does need an understudy. I mean, Kev, what are your thoughts? Again, same as the Lavia question, really. If Salah goes down...
It's but this is always going to be. It'll always be a harboring question. We, and it's been one that we've been looking at over and we have mentioned on here many a time. Who is going to be the backup to Salah when he goes off to AFCON or the World Cup and everything like that? I think with Szoboszlai, I think you've got someone already there that can come in on that side already for this season. I would like to see an understudy. And if this Nakamura is that kind of player and is that versatile, then yeah, we can do that. And I wouldn't say that isn't a bad idea to do. Can he play on again? Is it what it's like what Klopp does? He likes to alternate his players around and not necessarily play on the side of where their foot is. But as Vanessa's put in there, you got Ben Doak there as well, who's very raw. Still, and I think from what I've seen already from Ben Doak, he is very raw and is very progressive. He likes to get forward. He's not scared to go up there and do a job. I think eventually it'll start coming soon where he'll need to get that ball a little bit cleaner out rather than taking an extra 2 or 3 touches or taking an extra person on. I think if you've got the likes of 2 players who as an understudy, so at least then you can get someone to do a decent job. But I wanted that for Lavia in the middle with Fabinho. I think the Fabinho deal has hampered our midfield so much this season that we now look as though we are relying on young players to actually to do a job for us, which we predominantly didn't want. We wanted someone to be an understudy to Fabinho and naturally gauge them in. That looks as though that's not going to be the case. But it's an intriguing one for me. But it's if this guy is as good as what Neil said, then you do have to build for the future, and it goes against what I've just said before. But again, if you can loan him back for the season, he doesn't have to come in this season. He comes in next, and then you've got then the likes of a Ben Doak and this Nakamura who can do a job.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, this is Liverpool we're talking about. We're not talking about Man City. We're not talking about Chelsea, even Manchester United. Liverpool don't have free money to spend. So there are priorities at the moment elsewhere before we can even have a luxury, and as ridiculous as that sounds, a luxury of building for the future, because that's the situation that we've put ourselves in yet again, it seems, this summer. Talking about the rebuild, because it does feel like a massive rebuild. Now, all of us have been wanting a rebuild, I think, for a while. When Klopp came out and said, today that everyone wanted a rebuild, and now we've got it, everyone's worrying. I'm excited. I don't think people are worried about a rebuild. It should have happened maybe last season. I think people are worried that A, it wasn't quicker, and B, that there's not been enough of a rebuild actually, moving forwards. We've only actually brought, remember, 2 players in, and we've lost around about 8 of them. So whilst players are going out and whilst we are saving massive amount of money with the wages, we're also struggling a little bit with incoming. So hopefully that will change. But as part of this rebuild, we've seen Jordan Henderson leave. And as part of this rebuild, that means that there will be a new captain. Now, Klopp said today that Virgil van Dijk is going to lead the team out tomorrow. And with that, he will then announce who the official captain will be once he's spoken to the players. I mean, I'll go on to my opinion in a moment about the captaincy, but the press conference itself, I get why they perhaps have done it. Maybe they want a bigger show. Maybe they want more PR in there before they announce a new captain. But for me, for you, what do you think in terms of the captaincy, in terms of how it's been handled, or in terms of who it should be? And I'll bring Neil in as we're doing that.
It's a mad one for me. This season's going to be a focus on a new regime and new voices to hear from, new influences, new leadership team. And I can't agree with Klopp. It is kind of exciting. I'm intrigued as to it is. I've said all along I want it to be Alisson. I think he deserves to be in with the shout for that. And I totally get where everyone else comes from. Everyone has an opinion on it. Not many are going to agree with me, and I take on board what everyone says because either one that everyone's mentioned could do a job. But is this a chance that you do with what we done with Henderson, and who was a young, vibrant player? You give it to a young, vibrant player in Trent and start the rebuild all together with a new voice, a young player who's going to be at the team in the team for a lot longer and will be here for the rest of his career. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So I get that. I think it's worrying for Virgil if he's been given the captaincy for tomorrow and then being. I think if you're reading in between the lines, it won't be him. But I would expect that anyone who is, I expect the others to still stand up and be part of that leadership team. There's enough in there. You've got Robbo, who's the Scotland captain. He should be vocal. He should be one of the vice, as should Virgil, as should Trent, or whoever it may be, and Alisson as well. They all have great leadership skills. I would quite happily. I'll be happy with any of them to myself. But me personally, as being an ex-goalkeeper myself, I would like it to be given to Alisson. But many wouldn't agree with that.
No, I generally think that's a really good shout, and I think that Alisson would be an absolutely solid pick. I think he's a leader on and off the pitch, and he's an absolute role model for everybody. And that he carries himself off the pitch so well. You don't really hear of any negativity around him. So I think that he would be a solid choice. And I would say certainly amongst the favourites. Neil, glad to have you back. We're talking about captaincy picks and selections and choices. And was there a little bit of confusion around Jurgen Klopp's press conference about the captaincy today? What are your thoughts about the Liverpool captaincy?
I think Virgil will be the new captain. And that wasn't based on what Klopp said. I think it was based on something that of what Virgil said, that he said he wasn't allowed to talk about it. So as to whether I would go with him, probably, in the hope that it kind of means that he gets back on his game and he takes the responsibility on and it helps him improve, because last season I think he was poor by his own standards. I agree with Kev. The most deserving is probably Alisson. Not always a big fan of having a goalkeeper as captain, which is, I think, the thing that probably makes me rule against that. So I get the Trent shout, but again, his attitude at time last season's was not as good as it should be. Can he command the respect of the likes of Virgil and Alisson? Possibly, but I think we're going for a big change, and I think maybe a little bit of stability to stick with Van Dijk, and then have Alisson, Robertson, Trent, and maybe Salah as part of that leadership group. Because Salah, again, he's another one whose performances continued. He wasn't at his best, but he still produced a very decent season. So, like Alisson, he's deserving of some kind of recognition. So for me, it's Virgil, and with those four in the leadership group with him.
I think personally, I think Virgil is the safest and easiest option. And I don't mean easy in a horrible way, of course. I just think he's been vice captain or third choice captain behind Milner. I think the natural fit and the natural progression for him is to move into the captaincy role, take a little bit of pressure off Trent, who I think is perhaps, whilst flourishing in that inverted right back role, it might take a little bit of pressure off him as well. And I know that Gerrard was captain when he was 24, but Gerrard seemed to have that presence about him as well. He didn't just have that captaincy because he was Scouse and because he was English. He had it because he led that team. I don't see Trent yet in that same mould. I think I personally would love Trent to be captain. That would be my actual pick because I'd love it for him to really take the team onto his shoulders. I just don't know whether he's ready yet. He certainly would be, I would say, in around about 1 or 2 years, especially perhaps learning to get to grips with this new role, which does open up a whole new debate then, because if Virgil does move into that captaincy role, well, who fills the vice captaincy? You know, because there's so many good shouts, and I tried to pull up so many comments in there. We've had Ali, we've had Robbo, we've had Salah as well. Remember the Egyptian captain, and Robertson. So, you know, there's lots and lots of leaders out there. I think a lot of people with Milner and Henderson going in particular were worried about the leadership and that core group of Liverpool, but it looks like actually it's been left to very, very capable hands as well. You know, there's a lot of, I think, excitement around that captaincy right now. And I think Virgil is perhaps at the time in his career ready enough to take that responsibility on. However, you know, there's 4 or 5 players in there who could definitely do the job.
Yeah, I think if Virgil's going to take the captaincy, I'm not sure what Alisson or Salah or Robertson, you know, who are both all senior players, 2 of them captain their countries. I'm not sure what they get out of the vice captaincy role. All right, the team might get something, but Trent, that would be kind of proactive planning, wouldn't it, for the future? If we think that Trent is captaincy material going forward, let's give him some extra responsibility, like we do. You know, we had Gerrard and Henderson, and kind of Henderson grew into that role. Can we do the same with Trent? Because with Virgil, you know, he's 32. We've probably not got a captain that's going to be there for 7 years, like we've just had, and Gerrard before. So we might be looking at 2 or 3 years before we transition to someone like Trent. So it probably makes sense for him to take that role. In my opinion.
Yeah, and this leads in really nicely with what Vanessa said, who was vice captain in Hippie's period. Hippie was actually only captain, I believe, for around about a season. He was actually vice captain to Jamie Redknapp, who was obviously, unfortunately at that time, more injured than he was playing. So that's why it did seem like Hippie was captain for a very long time. I could be mistaken there. That's just what I remember. But the vice captaincy role is so important. And I think we'll see that with Verge coming in. And then we'll see it hopefully with Trent coming in as well, because he's certainly going to be, you know, integral into anything that Liverpool do, as Trent Alexander-Arnold, wherever he plays, because that's always a debate as well to have. Does he play as a 6 or does he play as a right back? We won't get into that one just yet. We might do it if we've got time in a little bit, because I know that it's everyone's favourite debate, isn't it? Should Trent move into midfield or not? Our WhatsApp chat has been going crazy today about that debate as well. But we are going to move on to Khephren Thuram then, a player who Liverpool were linked so heavily to what seemed like 2 years ago, but really in reality it was about 6 weeks ago. It just feels like it's been that dragged out. Today it does look as though, or in the past couple of days, that Nice Sporting director Florent Gisheloffi on the potential Liverpool target Khephren Thuram said, if all parties are satisfied, a departure could happen. So, you know, Nice aren't going to come out and openly say, yeah, we're going to get rid of him, we're open to offers. So he's been quite strategic. It seemed as though Liverpool were on strings before they announced Dominic Szoboszlai, which is perhaps why Nice were playing hardball. Now all of the rumours have gone quiet. The Nice sporting director's come out and said this. And maybe he's thinking that Thuram has passed his sell-by date, so he's trying to stir up a little bit more. Thuram, for me, before even thinking about Szoboszlai, because I didn't think that was attainable for us, because I didn't think the Liverpool would actually go out and pay the release clause. I thought Thuram would be the person actually who came in ahead of Szoboszlai, mainly for pure financial reasons. I would be really excited for Thuram being that final midfielder coming in for Lavia. Kev, you've probably spoken about Thuram. In fact, you and I have probably spoken about Thuram about 6 weeks ago on Saturday night. Thoughts still on Thuram positive?
They are still. I totally agree with you. Szoboszlai is just, I thought that was dead and buried. Now be anything to do with Thuram. I would love Thuram and be able to play with 3/8 in the middle of that park, just to with the two right back and left back as an inverted. I think that would be, and for me, it's more about the physical presence of Thuram. He's 6'4". He's an absolute beast. Progressive with the ball. not necessarily a centre mid, but defensive duties is in his DNA. His dad was one of the best right backs in the world back in the day. So, and the apple doesn't fall too far away from the tree. So you could potentially bring him in and see if he can adapt this game to the versatility that we've already got in that midfield. I would love if we do get Lavia and Thuram, because I think that would it sets something. We haven't really then got a. You've got a number 6 in Lavia, but it leaves options to playing with 3. Do you play with 3/8s? Can you play with those 3/8s? It'd be great. I would love Thuram. I've loved him at the start when we were linked. I'm still hoping that we can get something done, but I can't see it myself personally. My heart's saying yeah, he will. My head's actually saying I don't think we will get Thuram. It'll be someone else.
It's when we talk about the right price, we were quoted last time anywhere between 35 and 45 million euros/pounds, depending on what report you read. So it's still a lot. It's not a lot of money when you think about Liverpool, but it is a lot of money when you think about Liverpool. So, Neil, thoughts on the Thuram deal?
I always thought that when we got Szoboszlai that would be the end of the Thuram speculation. And it did look that way, but as you say, there has been some noise from the Nice camp over the last few days. For me, I would. So if we're going to bring Lavia in, let's assume that gets done. I would still rather have someone that is kind of a destroyer in that can play as a number 6 to come in. I would put that as a higher priority than Thuram at the moment. I believe he has played 6, but not for some time. So I think I would leave it if it meant I could get someone to come in and compete with Lavia for that number, or play alongside Lavia as a destroyer in the middle of the park.
Yeah, and Thuram looks press resistant. He looks ready to go as a number 8 for Liverpool, and 3/8 seems really enticing. Actually, if I'm honest, it generally does. If they're box to box, then they can certainly rotate in defensive duties as well. I know that Thuram's defensive stats are actually quite impressive. I certainly wouldn't be against that if it is going to be Thuram coming in as well as Lavia, obviously. I do think that, if we're looking at between Thuram and Kone, who we were linked to as well, and a few people have brought that up into the chat, Kone does seem to be a little bit more defensive-minded than Thuram as well. I mean, Neil, I'll go back to you. Thoughts on Kone, really? Do you think that that's something that Liverpool might revive their interest in? I know that he had that knee injury in the under-21 championships. Thankfully, it wasn't too severe, because it did look like it could have been a severe one. But is Kone a sort of monster who could come in and play alongside rotating Lavia?
Yeah, so I think he's more used to playing, in a defensive role, and he can also play in the 8 role. He's mobile. He carries the ball really, really well. And I think when we were linked with both of them, there was a lot of excitement about Kone as well as Thuram. And he's probably going to be a little bit cheaper as well. So I think that would make more sense to me out of the two. I'd love all 3, Lavia, Kone and Thuram, but I think we've got other priorities towards our own goal that probably need to be sorted before we start thinking about another 3 midfielders. So I would think Kone is probably a more sensible option looking at the balance of the squad.
Yeah, I mean, Kev, thoughts on Kone? Does that knee injury hamper him somewhat?
It could do. As I say, it's not unusual for us to buy an injury-prone midfielder, is it? Do you know what I mean? We've had quite a few of them over the past couple of years. It's. I agree with Neil. I would love all 3 of them myself, but personally, I can't see us paying for Kone as well as Thuram when we've got, as it was shown in the last pre-season game, if you lose 2 of our prominent centre backs and maybe Robbo as well and a Trent, it looks abysmal at that back. Do you know what I mean? That's a priority for me next. As I say, get Lavia done. If anything else can be done within the midfield, that's fine. But priority is getting someone in as a backup to our centre backs. Myself personally, Kone, I agree with Neil. Is more defensive, and I think I would have been happy if we would have got him and Thuram in, but Sloboslai has changed that in a way, in a sense. So I agree with Neil totally in the fact that we do need a destroyer in the middle of that park, a number 6, a proper number 6, someone over 6 foot for me personally, because the physicality I've mentioned numerous times in our midfield, which was lacking last season. I'd like us to have someone like that, like a Patrick Vieira kind of starter player, just wants to just go out and just loves the tackle. So for me, Kone, if you can get him for 10 million, maybe, but my priorities basically in the back four, personally.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Rich, just on that, another one that was the report from The Athletic came out last night was Tyler Adams. So again, he probably doesn't fit the he's probably not a destroyer, but he's a very good holding midfield player and can also play at right back. So I'm not saying he's the perfect 6 for us, but he does have that versatility where he can also cover at right back, which is which is where we've got we don't know what's going to happen with Connor Bradley. Is he going to go out on loan? There's talk that he's a minor injury. But like Kone, I think the concern with Tyler Adams is injuries. And he's out with a hamstring problem till September, end of September anyway. So probably not going to happen. But is another one that's got injury problems, but is quite versatile as well.
Yeah, I think the report that you're referring to is the one where it says that he had a 20 million euro release clause.
Yeah.
And he does look like an absolute player, but unfortunately, hamstrings, as Klopp said in one of his very, very first seasons, is the bastard word, and that certainly rings true.
Yeah, and he's not back till October anyway, so I think that probably rules him out. But in the past, that's the sort of deal, looking at a relegated club, reasonable price tag, it's something that we might have done, but not this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, as we pulled up, nearly 300 viewers tonight. So thank you so much for spending your Saturday night with us. We are, as always, appreciative as ever. If you could give us a like and a subscribe, it does go a long, long way into getting guests such as Mo Chatra in. And the podcast does really, really well with numbers as well, with special guests in. So it does all go back to you as in terms of special guests. And apart from us free special guests, you can get more content as well from people who know what they're talking about as well. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us. Talking about the centre-backs then, because it does seem like once the Lavia deal is done, there are optimists amongst us who think that a centre-back option should be next. Now, Kev alluded to it earlier, watching that friendly the other day was great. It was a really good watch, really enjoyed it, a 4-4 thriller. Much more intriguing going forwards than we were at defending. Matip seemed a little bit slower. I think there was only really Gomez as in the senior player there in the second half. But there is a massive drop-off when you look at Van Dijk and Konate. And as much as I love Joel Matip, he's not looked as sharp. Now, maybe that's just because it's pre-season and maybe he's just going through the motions and getting back to match fitness. But there does seem a drop-off in centre-back, which is especially worrying because we don't want to be in this situation next summer where we need a centre back, like we're saying, we need a midfielder, we need a whole squad rebuild, because let's face it, I think Matip's days are in his twilight career. Joe Gomez has yet to hit those dizzying heights that he managed. Virgil van Dijk, again, as great as he is, and some say still the best centre back in the world, hasn't really recovered back to himself after that awful knee injury, and who would, in complete fairness. So that only leaves Konate, who has had an injury problem or two. Neil, is Liverpool's priority having to now switch focus to a centre-back rather than another central midfielder?
I think, assuming Lavia comes in, then yes, absolutely, because I think you've kind of alluded to it. The defence will become what the midfield became. In a year's time, we could have real problems. So we need to be proactive. There needs to be at least one. I I would like to see 2 additions. I don't expect to see 2, but there has to be at least 1, because it didn't look good when we made those changes the other day. And I think, I don't want it to be a knee-jerk reaction. It's a friendly, lots of changes and whatever. But would we feel confident if Konate or Van Dijk were injured long term, that we'd have sufficient cover? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we would. So for me, it's sort the number 6 role. If that's Lavia for now, fine. And then we must focus on the defence.
Yeah, Kev, same question really to you. Is priority after Lavia? Let's say he does get done, and we're all being optimistic here because we try to do that as more often as we can to try on our Saturday night to try and, liven your Saturday nights up and not be too pessimistic. But let's say Lavia gets over the line this week. I'm saying Wednesday. Are we then banging for a central defender?
Absolutely, 100%. We have to. To be fair to the 2 centre backs, on the other day, they have been playing 3 training sessions, and we're doing a light training session, then traveling, playing a match, and then another light training session. So their heads are not all over, and their heads are being all over the place. So what we saw is not necessarily what we're going to see when the season starts. It just looks a bit frail at the minute. But my concern, and always will be, is you look at the age of those centre-backs. You got Van Dijk, who's 32. You got Matip in it, coming up to his 30s. We are going to have a similar position. It's the same issue that we have had with the midfield for the last 2 to 3 seasons. I totally agree with Neil. We need to get someone in, and if we can get 2 in, that would be amazing. We have got 1 in, which was a 14-year-old, but he's not going to be ready for at least another 4 years. So we may have already got 2 in FSG eyes, but no, we do need someone, and preferably someone for that left sense as a left centre back. For me personally, because Van Dijk hasn't been his best, and he'll ultimately agree with that. I think it's because we rely on him too much, we depend on him, and for me, we need to be able to play games without Van Dijk being part of that team. We need to be able to rest him, and we need to have someone who's that good. Now, Levi Colwill, I would love us to go out and buy him. And try our hand again in for him. That would be a perfect backup. He can also play left back as well. It again, a bit of versatility, a young player. It allow him to be an understudy to Virgil. He'll get the games that's required. I'd like someone like that, someone of a young age who can come in, do a job, but will learn from the best. And then that allows us then to maybe not going in next year and looking for 2 or 3, but you then adapt and you bring in another 2, and it doesn't affect us in there. We're spending all transfer window like we are this looking for midfielders. You can then go out and search and bring other players in. That's what we should be doing. Be a bit more proactive, as Neil's alluded to in this stream.
Yeah, and that seems to be a massive trend that Liverpool have, is we only sign players when we actually need them, but really we know we need a centre-back soon, if not already. This should have been addressed again, but listen, these things maybe take time, maybe the best player's not available right now, and we know what Klopp's like. He does only want to sign who he wants to sign as well. Kev, you mentioned it earlier, the young lad who signed from Wolves, Harvey Owen, £800,000, 14-year-old.
Yeah,
that lad must have some absolute potential, because that's an exciting one. And you said 4 years. I reckon with our defence as it is, he might be looking at 18 months before a starting place, perhaps.
Who knows, mate? Who knows? It could be over. I'll be honest, I haven't seen anything of the lad. I've heard of the potential. I've heard how good he could be. And these are the kind of deals that you want us to see us do. I wish we'd done more of these. I'd like us to take those little gambles. Yeah, it's a bit of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's an investment that you're looking at, and it is based on potential. his value is not going to go much lower than that unless something seriously drastically happens to his career and he falls off a cliff. So it's always classed as a monetary investment. I wish we'd do it not only with European players, but I'd wish we would and do that with more South American players. Myself personally, there are great gems out there. You know, Brighton I've brought a few in. Why can't we do exactly the same? And you know, it allows us then to build our academy up with quality players, and everyone can then it builds the academy and up. It gets them playing to a better standard, and it's more and a more likelihood of those players coming in and being part around that first team. He looks he looks great. I can't wait to see him playing for the under 18s and or the younger teams next season and see how he does. Because if you come in with that price tag, it's basically saying to everyone that I'm here I'm here to be part of that first team. So no, it's good to see that we are actually proactively doing that at a younger age. Better than what we have done.
Harvey Owen, it's certainly a name to remember for the future. Really quick then, before we sign off, there are 278 of you in the chat. Thank you so much. We are, as always, so happy to have you all here. And I want all 279 of you now to put your responses into the chat, because I'm going to ask a question that has blown my mind, and I changed my mind hourly. Who should Liverpool's front three be against Chelsea? Well, before I throw my answer down as well, but it's so good to have so many options up top and actually be, well, who on earth should we play? Because all five of them have looked absolutely tip top in pre-season. It's such a conundrum for Klopp, but a beautiful conundrum to have. So 282 of you right now, 282 of you in the chat. Give us your top three, and I'm going to go to Neil first. Who should be your starting three against Chelsea and why?
Sorry, Richie. Just before we do that, Paul's mentioned the links to Guardiola today in the media. I did look at that, and I think it's come from Fitches, which is not the strongest of sources. So I wouldn't be getting too excited at the moment based on the source. So yeah. In terms of front three, I mean, I think the only thing that's guaranteed is that the Mo Salah will play on the right. There's a case that you could play four of them because Cody Gakpo's been playing in a deeper role so far. I think he will start in the middle, and then you've got a choice between Jota and Diaz on the left wing. Both have looked good. Jota looks incredibly sharp at the moment. So, and when people are asked for their strongest team and which team they would go with for these games, Jota never gets in any of them. So I'm going to go Mohamed Salah, Cody Gakpo, Diogo Jota.
Nice. And I'm just literally, I think I said 287 of you putting in the chats. I think they are. I'm just literally clicking all through them, and you can see how varied they all are. Kev, how about you?
It's I'm like you, Rich. I'm changing every half hour. If I'm being perfectly honest, I would love us to play all five. That would be amazing if you could see if that could happen. I doubt it myself personally, but I think there's one person who will definitely be playing. That will be Mo Salah. I totally agree with Neil, and then the rest is open to debate. And I can't wait for this to be in our chat because this will send it off the charts. You can make a case for everyone. I think everyone has scored as well, which makes it even more difficult. I've liked the way Nunes has played. I like the calmness of how he's took his goals. I like the link-up play and the assist he done in the last game. In 45 minutes, he played absolutely superb, and it was probably one of his best performances, albeit against a second division Bundesliga German team. I like Diaz. I like what he's producing on that left-hand side. He's actually providing goals as well as assists. Jota is probably the best. Has looked phenomenal this season, and I don't disagree with Neil with that. For me, it would have to be It would be Jota, Nunes, Salah with Gakpo behind.
Wow, you're going for the 4. I like it. It depends on this 6 role as well, because
It does.
you could have 2 double pivots there, and Cody could definitely play in that 10 role, dropping deep, and Nunes playing as the advanced forward. So it's so nice, and probably one of the best things about this Liverpool attack is that it's so unpredictable, and it is going to be horses for courses, I believe, for most of this season, and rightly, that's how it should be too. For me, I'm going Diaz on the left, on the right, Mo Salah, because the centre is so difficult. I'm a massive Darwin Núñez fan, but I think that we saw him in midweek when he came off the bench and he bagged 2 goals. He perhaps should have got 3. I think Gakpo does the work early on. I think Nunes comes on as that impact sub against Chelsea, who are still perhaps finding their feet a little bit, and Nunes can exploit any tiredness in there, especially if we mentioned him earlier. I think Levi Colwill was absolutely sensational. I'd love him in a Liverpool shirt, but after 60, 70 minutes, is he going to have the patience and is he going to have the perseverance to put up with a Darwin Núñez? Maybe not. Maybe we'll see. It's a great conundrum to have, because we seem to be lacking everywhere apart from in goal and up top. So both ends of the pitch is great. If we could just work out that little bit of a middle bit, we'll be there or thereabouts, I'm sure, at the end of the season. We are going to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday night. You go and have a really chilled evening. Go and enjoy the weather. If it's nice and sunny where you are as well, go and put your feet up, because I'm sure it's all well deserved. Okay, so from Kev, from Neil, and from myself, it's been a pleasure to host all of you, and we wish you well. Hopefully Liverpool turn up tomorrow against Leicester and we come back from Singapore with a couple more signings maybe. But as now and forever, up the Reds.